Most men don't notice it at first. They step into the cold water, the same routine they've been doing for months, maybe years. The shock hits, the breathing quickens, the body tightens, and they assume it's working, because that's what they've been told. Cold exposure strengthens the system. It builds resilience. It improves circulation. For younger men, that may be true, but after 50, something changes. The body doesn't respond the same way. The signals slow down. The recovery takes longer. And what was once a tool for vitality can quietly become a stressor the system can't keep up with. I'm Dr. Emily Carter, and I've spent over a decade working with men navigating the physiological shifts that happen after 50. Not the dramatic changes everyone talks about. The quiet ones, the ones men dismiss until they can't anymore. Today we're talking about cold showers, not whether they work, but whether they work the way men think they do as the body ages. Because there's a difference between biological stress that strengthens and stress that depletes. And after 50, that line becomes much thinner than most men realise. Let's start with what happens in a younger body. When a man in his 20s or 30s steps into cold water, the body reacts predictably. Blood vessels near the skin constrict immediately. That's vasoconstriction. The body is protecting its core temperature. Then, within minutes, something remarkable happens. The vessels dilate again. Fresh blood rushes back in. Oxygen floods the tissue. The system resets. This cycle, contraction and expansion, is what people mean when they say cold showers improve circulation. It's cardiovascular calisthenics. The vessels practice opening and closing rapidly, and in a young, flexible vascular system, this works beautifully. But after 50, the sequence changes. The constriction still happens. That's automatic. It's a survival reflex. But the dilation afterward, the part where the vessels are supposed to open wide and restore flow, that slows down, sometimes significantly. This isn't a failure. It's adaptation. The arterial walls have stiffened slightly over decades. The endothelial cells lining those vessels, the ones responsible for releasing nitric oxide, aren't as responsive as they once were. Nitric oxide is the chemical signal that tells blood vessels to relax. In younger men, it's released quickly and abundantly. In older men, production drops. Response time increases. So when a 55-year-old man takes a cold shower expecting the same cardiovascular boost he read about online, his body is working through a delayed script. The vessels constrict on cue, but they don't rebound as fast, and that delay has consequences. Most men describe it as feeling cold longer, not just during the shower, after. They step out, towel off, get dressed. But the chill lingers. Their fingers stay pale. Their toes feel numb. It takes 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes before warmth fully returns. They assume it's just part of the process, that the cold is supposed to feel harder as they age. But what they're actually experiencing is prolonged vasoconstriction. The vessels are staying tight longer than they should. And during that window, circulation to certain areas that depend on consistent blood flow, drops. The extremities are obvious: hands, feet, fingers, toes. But the same mechanism affects deeper tissue: pelvic circulation, morning response, recovery between exertion. This is where men start noticing patterns they don't connect at first. They take cold showers every morning. They feel alert initially. But by midday, energy dips. By evening, they feel heavier, not tired exactly, just less responsive. Some men notice changes in their morning state. Firmness that used to be reliable becomes inconsistent. They don't lose it completely. It just softens, takes longer to return, and because it's gradual, they don't link it to the cold exposure. But the body does. Here's what the research quietly suggests. Cold exposure triggers a stress response. That's the point. Controlled stress teaches the body to adapt. But adaptation requires recovery, and recovery requires resources. In younger men, those resources, hormonal signalling, vascular flexibility, mitochondrial efficiency, are abundant. The body can afford the stress. It bounces back quickly. In older men, those same resources are limited, not gone, just finite. Every time the body constricts and struggles to dilate, it's spending energy. Every time circulation slows and has to restart, the system works harder, And if that happens every single morning, the cost compounds. The body starts compensating. It prioritizes essential functions: core temperature, heart function, brain activity. But secondary systems, libido, muscle recovery, nighttime repair, get less attention. This is why some men feel sharper mentally after cold showers, but notice other aspects of vitality quietly declining. The brain is getting blood, other areas aren't getting as much. Let me explain what's happening at the cellular level. Every blood vessel in your body is lined with a single layer of cells called the endothelium. Think of it as the interface between your blood and your tissues. When you're young, this lining is smooth, responsive, elastic. It releases nitric oxide on demand. It responds to temperature changes within seconds. But with each decade past 30, this lining changes. Oxidative stress accumulates. Inflammation becomes chronic, even if it's low-grade. The cells lose some of their responsiveness. It's not disease, it's aging. And one of the first places this shows up is in how quickly your vessels can switch from constricted to dilated. In your 20s, that switch happens in under a minute. By your 50s, it can take 5 minutes, sometimes 10. And during that lag time, your tissues are waiting for oxygen. Your muscles are waiting for nutrients. Your nerves are waiting for signals. This is why men over 50 often describe feeling stiff in the morning, not just in their joints, in their entire body. The circulation hasn't fully opened yet. And when you add a cold shower to that equation, you're asking a system that's already slower to perform at the speed it used to. It tries, but the effort is greater, the recovery is longer, and if this happens every single day, the body never fully catches up. Let's talk about cortisol for a moment. Cold exposure raises cortisol. That's expected. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. It mobilizes energy. It sharpens focus. In short bursts, it's beneficial. But in men over 50, baseline cortisol tends to be higher already. Age-related stress on the system, joint stiffness, slower recovery, disrupted sleep, keeps cortisol elevated. When you add cold exposure on top of that, you're layering stress on stress. And cortisol has a direct relationship with testosterone. When cortisol stays elevated, testosterone production drops, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. This is why some men report feeling energized in the morning after a cold shower, but notice drive declining over weeks or months. They're getting the acute cortisol spike, the alertness, but they're suppressing the hormonal recovery that happens when the body is allowed to stay calm. The body interprets daily cold exposure as a signal of environmental threat, and when the body thinks it's under threat, it doesn't prioritize reproduction, recovery, or building tissue. It prioritizes survival. There's another factor most men overlook. Temperature regulation becomes less efficient with age. When you're young, your body can generate heat quickly. Blood flow increases. Metabolism ramps up. You warm up from the inside out. But after 50, that metabolic flexibility decreases. The thyroid slows slightly. Muscle mass declines if not maintained. Brown fat, the metabolically active tissue that generates heat, becomes less responsive. So when you take a cold shower, your body has to work harder to restore normal temperature. And that work costs energy. Energy that could have gone toward other processes: tissue repair, hormone production, digestive efficiency. This is why some men notice they feel colder throughout the day after starting a cold shower routine. It's not that the cold made them weaker. It's that their baseline thermoregulation is now operating at a higher energy cost. The body is constantly working to stay warm, and that constant work is draining resources from other systems. Men don't connect this. They assume they're just getting older, that they're becoming more sensitive to cold. But it's often the habit itself creating the sensitivity. Now, I'm not saying cold showers are harmful. I'm saying the timing, the duration, and the frequency need to be calibrated differently after 50. Because what works for a 30-year-old following an internet protocol may quietly deplete a 60-year-old doing the exact same thing. Most men don't adjust. They assume their body should keep up. And when it doesn't, they push harder. Longer showers, colder water, more discipline. But the body doesn't respond to discipline the same way it did at 30. It responds to precision. And precision means understanding the difference between a stressor that challenges the system and a stressor that exhausts it. Here's what doctors observe in clinical practice. Men who stop cold showers entirely often notice their morning response improves within days, not because cold water was directly harming anything, but because the system finally had space to recover. The vessels didn't have to constrict and dilate under stress every single day, the cortisol stayed lower, the testosterone had room to stabilize, and circulation, the foundation of everything, improved naturally. On the other hand, men who continue cold exposure but reduce frequency, say 2 or 3 times per week instead of daily, often report feeling the benefits without the lingering depletion. Their body gets the stimulus, but it also gets recovery time. That balance is critical, and it's rarely discussed in the content men consume online, because most cold exposure advice comes from younger voices, athletes in their 20s, biohackers in their 30s, and their bodies can afford daily stress. Yours might not be able to anymore. Let's talk about mornings specifically. Many men take cold showers first thing after waking. The logic makes sense. Shock the system. Wake up. Start the day alert. But here's what's happening inside. When you wake up, your body is already in a delicate transition. It's shifting from parasympathetic mode, rest and repair, to sympathetic mode, activity and alertness. That transition takes time. Cortisol naturally rises in the first hour after waking. That's healthy. It's called the cortisol awakening response. But when you add a cold shower on top of that, you're forcing a double spike. The body constricts. Cortisol surges. Blood pressure rises. For younger men, this feels energizing. For older men, it can feel taxing. And if it happens every morning for months, the body stops recovering fully at night. Because nighttime repair depends on staying in parasympathetic mode, calm, open circulation, steady hormone release. But if the body knows another cold shock is coming in 6 hours, it stays guarded. The nervous system doesn't fully relax. The vessels don't fully open. The morning state, the natural firmness that indicates healthy nighttime recovery, weakens. And men don't connect it to the shower. They think it's age, they think it's stress, they think it's sleep. But it's often the habit they assumed was helping. Here's another pattern that emerges quietly. Men who do intense cold exposure in the evening, after workouts or before bed, often report worse sleep quality. Not insomnia, not waking up constantly, just lighter sleep, less restorative. They wake up feeling like they didn't fully shut down. And they're right. Evening cold exposure keeps the sympathetic nervous system engaged longer than it should be. The body is supposed to wind down after sunset. Core temperature drops slightly, blood vessels relax, the system prepares for repair. But cold exposure does the opposite. It raises alertness. It tightens vessels. It signals the body to stay vigilant. And even though the acute cold passes, the signal lingers. This is why some men noticed their sleep felt better before they started evening cold protocols. It's not that sleep got worse, it's that recovery got interrupted, and recovery is where testosterone rebuilds, where growth hormone releases, where circulation resets for the next day. When that's compromised night after night, the body starts operating in a low-grade deficit. Energy drops, focus weakens, drive fades, and the man attributes it to getting older. But it's not age, it's accumulated stress without adequate recovery. Let's address something that doesn't get talked about enough. The cardiovascular system ages differently in different men. Some men at 60 have vascular systems that function like they're 45. Others at 50 have systems that function like they're 65. This isn't about genetics alone. It's about accumulated stress over decades, years of poor sleep, years of elevated cortisol, years of inflammation from diet, lack of movement, chronic stress. All of these factors affect how responsive the blood vessels remain. And when a man with an already compromised vascular system adds daily cold exposure, he's asking vessels that are already struggling to perform an advanced task. It's like asking someone with a stiff knee to run sprints every morning. They can do it. But the cost is higher, the recovery takes longer, and eventually something gives. Most men don't know the state of their vascular system. They assume if they don't have high blood pressure or heart disease, they're fine. But vascular aging happens long before disease appears. It shows up in recovery time, in energy stability, in temperature regulation, in morning response. And cold showers expose that aging faster than almost any other daily habit. Because cold exposure demands vascular flexibility. And if that flexibility is already declining, the demand becomes a burden. Here's what often happens over time. A man starts cold showers at 52. He feels great initially, alert, energized, proud of his discipline. 6 months later, he still feels the morning boost, but he's noticing he needs more coffee by afternoon. His sleep feels lighter, his recovery from workouts takes longer. A year later, the morning boost is smaller. He has to stay in the cold longer to feel the same effect, and his baseline energy throughout the day is lower than it was before he started. But he doesn't stop, because he's committed, because he read it's good for him, because stopping feels like giving up, and his body keeps compensating, keeps prioritizing stress management over recovery, keeps operating in a semi-activated state. Until one day, something shifts. Maybe his morning response weakens noticeably. Maybe his blood pressure creeps up. Maybe his doctor mentions something about inflammation markers, and he doesn't connect it to the cold showers. Because in his mind, cold showers are healthy. They're supposed to help. But the body doesn't care what the mind believes. It only responds to what's actually happening. And what's actually happening is chronic stress without adequate recovery. Let's address the elephant in the room. What about the studies showing cold exposure benefits? They exist. They're real. Cold exposure can improve insulin sensitivity. It can stimulate brown fat activation. It can enhance mental resilience. But most of those studies are conducted on younger populations, or they involve short-term interventions, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Very few long-term studies track what happens to men over 50 who maintain daily cold exposure for months or years. And the ones that do exist show something interesting. The benefits plateau. Sometimes they reverse. Because the body adapts to stress by becoming more efficient at managing it. But efficiency in stress response means the system stays in a semi-activated state. It's like leaving your car engine idling all the time instead of turning it on and off as needed. Eventually the engine wears down faster. The same happens with vascular tone, with hormonal balance, with nervous system regulation. Short-term stress builds resilience. Long-term stress without recovery builds fragility. And after 50, the line between those two is thinner than most men realise. There's also the issue of cumulative stressors. Most men aren't just taking cold showers, they're also working full-time. Managing family stress, dealing with financial pressure, exercising regularly, maybe restricting calories or trying intermittent fasting. Each of these is a stressor. Each one asks the body to adapt. And the body can handle multiple stressors when it's young, when recovery resources are abundant. But after 50, every stressor compounds. The cold shower isn't the problem in isolation. It's the cold shower plus the stress at work, plus the poor sleep, plus the intense workout, plus the calorie restriction. The body is trying to manage all of it. And it does, for a while. But eventually one system starts to give, usually the one that's least essential for immediate survival. And for men, that's often hormonal balance, testosterone, libido, recovery capacity. These are the systems that decline first when the body is overwhelmed. And men don't notice until the decline is significant, because it happens gradually. 1% less energy this month, 2% less drive next month, 3% weaker morning response the month after. None of it feels dramatic. Until one day, they look back and realise they haven't felt truly vital in months, and they still don't connect it to the habits they assumed were helping. So what does this mean practically? It means awareness. Not abandonment, not fear, just awareness. If you've been doing cold showers for years and you feel great, this doesn't apply to you. But if you've been doing them consistently and you've noticed subtle changes, slower recovery, lighter sleep, less morning response, it might be worth paying attention, because the body always adapts. That's its job, but adaptation isn't the same as thriving. Sometimes adaptation means compensating, and compensation works until it doesn't. Most men don't notice when compensation starts, they only notice when it stops, and by then, they've been operating in a deficit for months, sometimes years. Here's what I want you to consider. Your body at 55 is not weaker than it was at 30. It's different. It doesn't respond slower because it's failing. It responds slower because it's being more selective about where it spends energy. And when you give it a daily stressor, cold exposure, stress hormones, vasoconstriction, it has to decide. Do I prioritise recovery, or do I prioritise managing this stress? Most of the time it chooses stress management, because that's survival. But recovery is where vitality lives. Recovery is where morning firmness returns, where energy stabilizes, where the body remembers how to function like it used to. And if recovery keeps getting interrupted, those things quietly fade, not because of age, because of accumulation. So here's the question I'd ask you to sit with. Are the cold showers still serving you? Not in theory, not based on what you read online, but in your actual body, in your actual experience. Do you feel more vital than you did 6 months ago? Or just more disciplined? Do you wake up ready? Or do you wake up tight? Does your body feel open and responsive throughout the day? Or does it feel like it's constantly catching up? These aren't dramatic questions. They're subtle ones. Because the changes that matter most after 50 aren't the dramatic ones. They're the quiet ones. The ones that accumulate so slowly you don't notice until someone asks you to pay attention. Most men don't connect these dots early enough. They attribute the changes to aging, to stress, to sleep, and all of those factors matter. But sometimes the factor that matters most is the one they assumed was helping. The body doesn't lie. It adapts. An adaptation always leaves signals. The question is whether you're paying attention to them, or whether you're still following a protocol designed for a body that isn't yours anymore.